fired up about TV. This is amazing. This is my kind of crowd. So without further ado, I want you all to clap your hands till they're sore. Our guest, Aisha Harris from NPR's Pop Culture Happy Hour, to the stage. All right. Oh, did we go over mic etiquette?
Oh.
Keep it close.
Yes.
All right. Cool. Okay, I have to admit to a small bit of fangirling, but I'm a professional, so I haven't really indulged in it. Y'all, I'm so psyched that you are here. Pop Culture Happy Hour helped get me through the pandemic. Thank you all so much for going daily, even though I know that's a lot of work.
Yeah, well, luckily there's 4 of us. There's 4 hosts, so that is helpful. So I'm excited to be here. This is only my second live event since the pandemic. It's my first time wearing jeans in over 2 years. I'm very surprised they still fit. So yay! So I'm very happy to be here and happy to see you all, and thank you for being here. So
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, so just to tell you all a little bit about this event, the inspiration for this, for me at least, was the series finale of Insecure. And what was so interesting, the team at the time, there was a gentleman who has moved on, but he was a fan of the show, and I have to admit, I was kind of like, for real? Name was Tomas. His dad is like Scandinavian, mom's Venezuelan, very cerebral kind of guy who would have, a basketball game, Twitter, and deep dive research all on his computer at the same time. So Insecure came up in a conversation, and he was like, oh no, and I was like, who are you? What is happening? He knew all the backstories. He had his own opinions about Lawrence, the whole 9. And so,
wait, what were his opinions about Lawrence?
Not a fan.
Good.
Yes.
Well, Lawrence
was messy.
He was very
messy.
Yes.
But the thing about it, we were talking about the final episode, and he was disappointed. And I was like, what's wrong with you? And he said he didn't care for it because he wanted to see Issa move beyond being insecure because she circled back with Lawrence.
Yes.
And I was just like, oh, yeah, that happened. However, I loved seeing Issa and Molly because I was like, they were the ride or die of that show.
That was the real will they or
that
won't
was
they?
Exactly.
Yes.
And so that's where I was. And literally, he and I went back and forth. And I know Manny, who couldn't be with us tonight, was very confused. But it was just like, we should be talking about the election, but we need to figure out why Tomas is wrong about Insecure. And so from that, and just really taking a moment to pay attention to the characters that are developing, the question became, how has this evolved? And what television is saying about female friendship now? What does that tell us about the culture today? So, small question. What do you think?
Oh, that's the lead-up question. Well, I had the same exact feeling as Tomas did, where Lawrence, as an individual, I actually liked the growth that he had and the growth that all of the characters seemed to have on Insecure. But I was like, I don't care about the Issa Lawrence thing. I too wanted to see that evolve. And I think that was my one hesitation with like fully embracing the finale of that show was I really, like once I knew that Issa and Molly were good, I'm like, okay, that's all I needed. And it kind of, there have been comparisons to Sex and the City and Insecure and really any show with 4 female friendships. Sex and the City has been a comparison. But I think that's sort of what those two especially have in common is that at the end of the day, the protagonist winds up with the guy that we were told from the beginning that she was supposed to be with. And it's like, is that really the story we want to keep telling? Which is why I really appreciate that there are a lot of shows, other shows recently and within the ether. I want to talk about this, but it hasn't dropped yet. But there's a show where the finale is coming in a couple days. And actually, I can just say it because
names.
it's not really a spoiler because you know this, but like the end of Grace and Frankie, which is a show on Netflix that I love, then this isn't a spoiler. It's just like at the end of the day, it's all about their relationship. They're not, they might have other men that they're interested in, but it's really about this like lovely relationship between these two women. It's about their friendship. And I think that makes a huge difference. Like the fact that they don't it's not focused on who they're dating and who they wind up with. Like, I think that is to me, where we've come, how far we've come. Because like with Sex and the City, that's the case. Grey's Anatomy, I think also, for a while now, I haven't watched. I stopped, I think, around season 12, whenever that was.
Once Yang was gone, I was good.
Yeah, I
like,
lasted one season after Yang left. Or wait, no, I lasted half a season after Derek died. So that might have been like one or two. That's not a spoiler. Wait, or are you still heartbroken?
Oh wow. Do you need some Kleenex?
Yeah, I lasted like half a season after Derek died, and then I was like, whatever. But once Yang left, it was a completely different show, and that to me was the crux of like, I love the fact that their relationship was not about men; it was about sort of like a friendly competition, and trying to navigate being in the same workplace and wanting to get like having different career goals. Like Meredith she wound up having kids and getting married, and Yang's like, I don't want to do that. And there's like a great scene right around when Yang is leaving where she's just like, we chose different paths, and that's fine, but we have to accept that. Like, you have to accept that you becoming a mother and getting married meant that there are certain things within this profession that you can't do that I can do because of just like time. That's a thing. And so I love seeing these like these exceptions to the rules of female friendship, where it's like not just about talking about men, and it's not just about who you wind up with at the end of the series. It is about like that evolution of being both friends and also sometimes competition, or just like having these big knockdown drag out fights. And yeah.
So it's interesting. One, thank you so much. I had Grace and Frankie on the list of questions, so you've already taken care of that.
Great.
The other thing too about that particular show that fascinates me is on just really a couple of points. It reminds me, or when I first started watching it, I did have moments of thinking, oh yeah, the Golden Girls.
Yeah, it's the Golden Girls, the Odd Couple, but like filtered through a Nancy Meyers like aesthetic.
But not excessively Nancy.
I mean,
because she does a lot of the whole, oh my God, they met cute and now they're together.
I just mean the aesthetic, like the beach houses in Nancy Meyers' beach house. Like,
definitely the Diane Keaton energy.
Yes, coastal grandma. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Which my grandmother is not. Is
no,
yours?
No, I don't know. I'm from the suburbs of Connecticut. Like, it's not.
My grandmother's in Atlanta. No water.
Yeah. Oh, well, I guess we do have water in Connecticut, but we're not on the coast.
No cottage core?
No. Grew up very modestly middle class, not wealthy. Anyway.
So, do you find like Grace and Frankie and the Golden Girls, in a lot of ways, I think, are still considered, or in my opinion, would still be considered revolutionary because it's not just, this story of friendship. It's friendship at an older age.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things that I love about Grace and Frankie is the fact that, like, it gives myself as a millennial hope that you can still make new friends at that age. Because, like, part of the appeal of Grace and Frankie is that they start off as adversaries. They start off as, or not even frenemies. They really don't like each other. And then they learn to become actually like to the point of being very codependent in ways that are probably unhealthy. And the show explores that. But it really does give me hope that like you can keep finding new parts of yourself as you grow older. And the way in which it deals with the fact that they're both, septuagenarians, octogenarians, and they are facing the contemplation that one of them will die first, and that like what will that mean, and what does that mean to try and nurture those relationships while you still can. And I just love that dynamic. It's just it's a very sitcom-y, broad show in some ways, but it also is revolutionary in other ways where it feels like we still aren't seeing too many examples of friendship, female or male, that are over the age of like 50. And I think that's a good thing. I would love to see more of that. And preferably with like, not just coastal grandmas, but like coastal grandmas who might be Black or Latina or like all this other mixture of different types of older people.
Okay, so that brings me to another show. Everyone brace yourselves for another show trying to do something similar. And just like that.
Oh.
Deep sigh, everyone.
Because
like I'm of the age where I still remember getting together with my girlfriends to watch Sex and the City. Like the finale was an event. It was like, oh, who's your character? You better dress like her. Come on, ladies, the cocktails are going to be flowing. It's going to be amazing. And in that moment, my friend crew and I in Atlanta, all Black women, we weren't really thinking about, oh, we're not presented on screen. The experiences resonated. Now, 20 or so years later, and just like that, already there's a huge hole because of Samantha. And I'm like, if Kim Cattrall says no, you should say, she's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and it's like they launched it. I was excited to see the fashion, not gonna lie. And then it started, and it felt like the writing room was like, oh my gosh, there are all these criticisms of our show. We need to check every single one off. And their approach to friendship with the new friends of like the power squad of color.
I call them the diversity girlfriends.
Absolutely.
Because that's what they were. They were just there to be, accoutrement of the main characters. We did a whole podcast on this. We got a lot of flack for it. People calling us ageist for because we didn't like it. No, I mean, I think the biggest problem with the show was the fact that I think it should have been, if you're going to reboot things, I'm very much generally as a rule against rebooting things in most cases, but if you're gonna reboot something, then don't. In this case, I think they should have focused on the diversity girlfriends instead of making them sort of the sidekicks still. Because it was weird to see these characters like being siphoned off into these different plot lines and whatnot, and like going to a shop and having her wear a sari, but it's not actually a sari, as like lots of people pointed out after the fact, or like what Carrie wears at the event is not actually a sari. Like all of these little details, it's like, did you have people in the room to be there and check this? I think that is part of the issue that we're seeing, is that especially when it comes to trying to update pop culture, it's just the checkbox. It is we'll have the sidekick, we'll have the we'll have the queer person, the LGBT, like why Che?
Che.
Oh God, Che.
How do we feel about Che?
Che. I wanted so much more for Che and for Sarah Ramirez.
Sarah Ramirez is amazing.
I wanted so much more for them, and it's just that show. It is the prime example of what goes wrong, and there's going to be a second season because enough of us were talking about it that like it's going to go on. But I love Sex and the City. I was a little bit younger. My original diet of Sex and the City was on TBS. It was always airing, so I got like the watered down version of Sex and the City for a while. And then once I got to college and I could afford to, I got like the full on box set and I binged it. And I finally watched like the uncensored version. And I was like, oh my goodness, it's so much better. And so like I loved it, but I also recognized that there were no people who looked like me, or when there were, they were like the worst representation of people who look like me. Well, I mean, Blair Underwood's character was fine, but like there's that one episode where Samantha dates the black guy.
The sister.
Yeah, and then the sister comes up and she's like, you white women coming and taking our men. I'm like, that's not how we talk.
Because that's what we do every Thursday night.
That's what we do. We go up to white women and be like, you're taking my man. I can't believe you did this. So I accept that is what that was at that time, and now I think we need to move forward and stop looking to the past to try and correct. Like, obviously, we need to look to the past, but we do not need to excavate it and also like try and redo it and make it better, because they're not actually making it better. Like, they're making it worse. Yeah. They should have left it in the past.
Right? It's so funny. You're talking about the excavation and reboots, and it made me think of of Charmed.
Oh yeah. To be honest, I have not.
You're not missing much.
I'm not.
You're
Okay.
not.
I heard it wasn't.
I think what was striking to me about the brouhaha around it was seeing the stars of the original iteration go so hard against the new show. And it was like, just let it breathe. If it fails, it fails. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And there was definitely a racialized tone because their approach, I would say, of quote unquote righting whatever wrongs was to make this I'll say primarily Latina family, because two of the sisters are fathered by a Black man and the other sister is fathered by a Hispanic man, but their mother is Latina. And it was just it was uncomfortable. So I wasn't a big fan for the original, but I watched the new show almost like, how dare you all act like those boomers? We're like, don't do that. Like, that's how it felt. It was really weird.
Yeah, I mean, they also didn't they recently do was it My So-Called Life, or what was the show from the other show, Party of Five? They redid Party of Five with a Latinx family. I don't think it lasted very long. I watched like the first 2 episodes, and they really updated it to like they were dealing with immigration and ICE and all those things. But can we just get the stories being told that aren't based off of old existing properties?
Exactly.
I will say the one exception to that rule is One Day at a Time, which I loved, and I'm really sad that got canceled and then canceled again. I thought that was just such a good show, but I also didn't have I wasn't around when the original One Day at a Time, so I didn't have any reference point for it. But I did love that. But overall, we need to just be telling new stories and not relying on these old ones.
I agree. And one story, y'all, if you saw my notes, the list of like, what are the shows you want to talk about? So ridiculous.
There's so many shows.
There's so many. Did you watch Vida?
Yes, I love Vida.
That hurt when they canceled that.
Yeah, so I don't know how many people are familiar with Vida, but
Who knows Vida?
Okay, yeah. So no one really. It was on
deep cut.
Okay,
it
was on Stars, which I think also doesn't help. Because there's HBO, then there's Showtime, then there's Stars. In terms of like how many people have what, I think most people have HBO, fewer people have Showtime, even fewer people have Stars. Although Stars has some good stuff like P-Valley. Yes. P-Valley.
Yeah.
Yes. So excited for the 2nd season coming soon, I think in June. But yes, Vida was about 2 sisters, and it's based in LA, right? Yeah. And one of them, she's like the older sister, and she was living somewhere else. I can't remember where, but she's like the older, like more mature one. But she has everyone has issues on this show. But she comes back after their mother passes away, and it deals with queer themes and this like relationship between the sisters, the younger sister who stayed, and there's like a lot of, there's a lot of issues, but it showed a really different side of both friendship and sisterhood that I had not seen. And I highly recommend everyone watch it, because it's dealing with all these really fascinating, especially generational differences between queer people, like older queer people and younger queer people. And everyone's just like, it's so good. There's a lot of nudity, but like, that's Stars.
We can handle
Sometimes you have to warn people because they don't know. But like it's a really good show, and I highly recommend like get a 1-month subscription to Stars and then like binge it, because it's all out now. Like there were 2 seasons. I think it's only maybe like even 12, 13 episodes total, because each season was pretty short.
Yeah, I think the other thing too, which I want us to talk a little bit about, with this advent of more channels and streaming and what have you, it feels like we're getting richer stories. One of the things I loved about Vida, aside from the sisters and their dynamic, I felt like the show put me in their neighborhood.
Oh, absolutely.
And
you,
so
you have a sense of, I mean, I have not lived in LA, but like, I feel like I have in the same way you feel about Insecure, like when you're watching it, you understand sort of the layout of where things are, even if you've never been there. It's like a similar thing with this because they interact with all their neighbors. They interact with there's a one of the home bases, one of the main spaces is a bar that used to be like a queer bar, and then like it's slowly there's the colonizers are coming, and so it's like slowly turning into, as the whole neighborhood is being gentrified, there's this sort of battle over the bar, and just like the way in which those people interact with each other, like you feel a sense of community and you kind of understand what's going on there. It's just so good. I also love that there's an episode where they go to like a warehouse party, and it was like very fun.
You guys have to watch this show. It's so good.
Yeah.
We'll include a link in our little thank you email because everyone should see that show.
Yes.
What are some, like, just looking back, and as I was telling you, I was like, I was thinking, what did my grandparents watch? And I thought of like Lucy and Ethel and Alice and Trixie from the Honeymooners and all these shows. And, it seemed to the point that you mentioned about some of the shows earlier that female friendship was like a side benefit, but it was really, everything was really from the perspective of these women as extensions of their husbands and so on and so forth. But
I don't know. I would say I Love Lucy, so I'm a huge I Love Lucy fan. I was actually
I'll stop.
I have all seasons on DVD. I was just watching it last night actually before I went to bed. I've seen it hundreds of thousands of times. I went to the I Love Lucy Museum in Jamestown, New York. That is how big of a fan of I Love Lucy I am. So I would say that I Love Lucy is actually kind of it is about the relationship to their husbands, but I think it is also a really kind of progressive show because Ethel and Lucy are always getting into all this stuff and all these like hijinks without their husbands, like going against their husbands. And I think it's kind of progressive in like a 1950s kind of way. And even when Lucy and Ricky have a kid, like the kid becomes a focal point for like part of the season and then like suddenly grows up and gets like really big after like a season, and he's like 3 years old all of a sudden, like TV does. But like even when that happens, little Ricky's not really, he shows up every once in a while, and like those are like the least interesting episodes, but it's still about these adults and about Lucy and Ethel and their friendship and how they're like, Lucy's always able to get Ethel roped into these things. And so like I had to defend I Love Lucy as like actually a little bit more progressive than you might initially think. Obviously, it was still the 1950s, and Lucy's constantly like, she has an allowance because like that's what women had back then. Like her husband gives her an allowance, but like it's still, the friendship is really cool. I like it. I feel like Grace and Frankie, in a way, are sort of descendants of Lucy and Ethel in terms of like the stuff they get into.
Okay, I'm liking the direction that you're going because
I've never really thought this through until just now, but yes,
that's why we're here.
Yes.
So because this year or last year there were like 2 movies or 1 movie about Lucy. And
Being the Ricardos.
And Nicole Kidman didn't make sense to me.
Well, neither did Javier Bardem.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if it's come out yet, but Amy Poehler produced a documentary that premiered at Sundance this year that I saw. And there was also a podcast from Turner Classic Movies about Lucy, I Love Lucy, which was really good. I recommend if you have like any interest in it. It's very interesting to hear about like Lucille Ball's life. But yeah, she's kind of been everywhere for the last few months.
But with her show, was she a showrunner? Was she and her husband the showrunners?
Well, their production company, Desilu Productions, like Ricky, they were really kind of a team, and Ricky, I guess showrunner is the right word, but he sort of helped. He ran the show in terms of like what the business aspect of it, and then they had like a team of writers who were taking care of it. So yeah, they had a lot of power, and one of the fun facts that a lot of people know is that like in part Lucille Ball is responsible for Star Trek because Desilu Productions produced Star Trek, like the original iteration of Star Trek.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, they produced a lot of popular shows in the 1960s, so.
Because the reason I ask is I was wondering if having a female showrunner or a female head of the writer's room, if you feel that that makes a difference in the portrayal, or is just messiness part of Hollywood?
Well, messiness is always part of Hollywood, and like having a female showrunner definitely does not guarantee that it's going to be like a good show or a realistic show. But when I think of some of the shows that have done this the best, I do think of like Insecure, Girlfriends had Mara Brock Keel, Living Single. You know, there's all these shows that I think, and you were talking about I May Destroy You earlier. Like,
we could have like a whole program about I May Destroy You.
Yeah, the show that destroyed
that's assigned
me.
watching, everyone, just so you know.
Yeah. I do think it makes a difference in the same way, like having someone from whatever demographic or community they are from, writing from personal experience. Like Russian Doll, I think absolutely benefits from having Natasha Lyonne as like the I don't know if she's technically, I don't know if she was a showrunner for this season, but she's one of the executive producers, and she directed a bunch of episodes for this second season. So I definitely think it makes a huge difference. But it's not a guarantee. Like I can think of men who have created really smart portrayals of women. 8th Grade, Bo Burnham's feature debut, like my goodness, that movie. It made 8th grade so real again, and 8th grade is like the worst time of your life. And he did it from the perspective of a 13-year-old girl in a way that like wasn't icky or weird. It was just like, this is what it means to be a 13-year-old girl, and it sucks. But he was really able to tap into that, and I think, yeah, I don't want to like limit people, but I do think there's always the benefit, usually, of having alignment.
You're mentioning him is very interesting because, of course, you know, there are so many iconic women in television, and what I remember, like as a little kid, so I probably shouldn't have been watching these, but my mom was like, "It's on," like, you know, thinking of Florence and Louise from the Jeffersons, Florida and Walona from Good Times, and you know, All in the Family, and Maude. Who I did not appreciate until I was a grown-ass woman.
Yeah.
I was like, that is amazing that this was happening. And that was Norman Lear.
Yeah. Norman Lear, I mean, he's still with us. He's like 99 now.
He's up there.
He's up there. But he was responsible for so many female friendships, but also just Black people on TV. And then, of course, One Day at a Time, as I mentioned earlier, that show was originally produced by him and then reproduced. And I appreciate those people who are able to sort of let other creators and foster other creators who are not of the same demographic, because that's what we need, right? We need people who are crossing the aisle. Sounds so like political, but like, you know what I mean, just like being open to that. And that is the way that we get more diversity and more representation. And I think, you know, the good thing is I think we're at a point now, especially when it comes to Black representation on TV, we now have Black people who are also able to let other Black people in the door, whether it's Issa or Ava, Ryan Coogler producing Spike Lee, like all these people who are producing other people of color and Black people. I think it's great.
Do you think that expansion is on a trajectory to continue to include other communities, or is there anything that's worrying you, maybe?
I mean, everything ebbs and flows. Like, there are bursts of diversity or inclusion, or more stories being told. Like in the '90s, there's of course the Black TV Renaissance.
UPN.
UPN, or also known as You People's Network for some people. But yeah, and you know, Fox was In Living Color, all those shows. I do think that we've gotten a little bit further now where we won't hopefully slide too far back where we were in the early 2000s, where there were like no Black people or no Black-led sitcoms for a while. Shonda is she has her deals. Again, Ava is doing a lot of things. I think we have a lot more power brokers behind the scenes, whether it's Will Packer, producer. He's produced everything from like Girls Trip to I can't remember what else he's produced. He's produced like lots of things that you've seen or heard of. And Girls Trip is another example of a great female friendship movie, and that throwback to Set It Off, which is like, yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that things are doing better. I do think, we still are a little bit behind when it comes to queer representation, when it comes to Asian, Latino, like Latinas in Hollywood especially. Like, I think considering they are the largest minority demographic, if I remember, population-wise, if I'm remembering correctly, and they're still very underrepresented on TV. Like, when One Day at a Time was canceled, when Vida was canceled after 2 seasons, like, that leaves a gaping hole. So there's still a very long way to go, but I'm curious to see how long it takes before we are talking about these things. I fully acknowledge that there are differences within the demographics of like who's being able to tell these stories when it comes to people who aren't white, straight people. It's not equal in terms of how far we've come.
Okay, thank you. What you just shared, of course, now I want to talk about Pose.
Oh, I love Pose so much. I was very happy to see it last. I feel like 3 seasons was actually like perfect amount.
How did you?
I
Real talk, 3rd season thoughts?
I liked the 3rd season.
You didn't feel like it was rushed?
I mean, no. Okay. I definitely think that like they had to deal with some stuff because I forget his name, but one of the actors, he had a death in the family, and so he was unable to. I think he was only in like the first episode or the first 2 episodes, and now I'm forgetting his name. Ryan Jamal Swain. He
was the dancer.
He was the one who wanted to be a dancer. Right. But I overall, I thought it did a really good job of juggling, like moving through time, moving across time, and really showing how these characters had evolved. And Electra, like, oh my goodness, the fact that she started off as like the big bad, and then you really see her become this like, she was the mother. She was always the mother, but she was the mother who, like, softened and still had her edges, still had like knew how to handle herself, like in like whenever she was facing something on the outside. But I really thought the show did such a good job of depicting chosen family and chosen friends and the difficulties and the fact that like it's not always going to be smooth sailing and that there's going to be some like knockdown, drag out fights, but at the end of the day, especially in that era where like the world was against you, you still had to like come together. So I do love Pose, and I think this 3rd season I was overall like pretty satisfied with it.
Okay,
but
it just because it was such a beautiful show and it was something we'd never seen before. I think I really just wanted it to go on and on.
Yeah, I'm the type of person who like likes endings, and I prefer for things to go out when they're good rather than stay on too long and then like get really bad. And I didn't want to see a show like this especially get bad. But of course, there's like not really anything that I can think of that has sort of stood in its place or like come in to take its place or come in to do something different, obviously. Like I don't need another Pose, but like we need more of that kind of storytelling.
Okay. So we're gonna turn it over to audience questions in just a bit, but thank you so much for going on this journey with me of touring my brain of favorite shows. What are some shows that you're excited about right now, like underrated faves or?
I mean, Pen 15 is great. If you haven't watched it, there's again another short show. It's 2 seasons. It is partially it's another show that sort of spoke to me because I was 12, 13 in 2000 when the show was set, and has everyone at least heard of it? If not, seen it? Okay, so I don't need to explain it. But it's basically like 2 actresses who are my age are playing themselves or like a version of themselves in middle school, and and they're acting alongside all these kids who are actually like 12 and 13. It's great. But it does a really good job of showing like that weird, awkward time in your life, and also like what it means to be like also like an interracial friendship, because Maya Erskine is Asian American, and yeah, it's just a really good show, and I believe it's all on Hulu now, so check that out. Also, Tuca and Birdie, love Tuca and Birdie. It's Ali Wong and Tiffany Haddish animated show. They're playing a toucan and another bird. I can't remember, parakeet. I don't remember. It's a weird show, but it deals really well with like codependent friendships and how that can be detrimental to your health, and also is a really great example of like, I've never seen anxiety portrayed in quite the same way that it is here. And as someone who like has high functioning anxiety, like I identify so much with the Tiffany Haddish character and like the way she handles things. I'm like, yeah, it's a really good show. So definitely check out Two Gun Birdie, which I think is also streaming on Hulu. Like,
or is that Netflix?
So the first season was on Netflix, and then it didn't. They canceled it after one season, which was annoying. And then Adult Swim picked it up, and so I think at least the second season is on Hulu, if not the first. Okay. But yeah, I highly recommend it.
Excellent, everyone. We're ready for some questions. I was about to have y'all give a round of applause, but we'll save that to the end. Okay. Who has a question? Seriously? Okay. All right, Joshua.
All right. Can you comment on Motherland? Do you know it?
No.
No.
Sorry.
Shoot. Okay.
But
All right.
what is Motherland?
I think it's on Hulu, and it's like a sort of I guess it's a sci-fi, but it's like a matriarchy where like it's young women who are like coming of age, and they're witches and they're saving the world. But I feel like broadly, what I was curious about is, and it's super violent, and it's like
I don't mind violence.
And these women are like the badasses saving the world, and I feel like there's a lot more of that. So I'm wondering like not to take it too far outside of friendship and the evolution of friendship and women, but like the context changing and like seeing those friendships in like places like in ways that challenge society, I guess, or like our idea
like
of
genre,
women.
like more genre.
Yeah, like I feel like there's an evolution that's been really interesting and sometimes like just exceptional to like bear witness to as a viewer.
Yeah, well, I haven't watched Motherland, but like I think of something like Yellow Jackets, which uses a lot of supernatural and stuff there, and I think that like that's really fascinating to me to see the ways that it plays with all of these sort of conventions around horror and thrillers, and also like high school dramas. It kind of reminded me of what was that? Jawbreaker. Do you remember that movie from like 98, 99? And it has Rose McGowan. Yes, thank you. Oh man, I loved that movie. I don't think it probably doesn't hold up. I don't know. I haven't watched it in years, but okay, it does. Okay, I need to rewatch it. But I love when you can sort of see these friendships or see these relationships of women in different, like not just a straightforward dramatic or comedic context, but also from like how does this manifest itself in horror or thriller? Oh, also Jennifer's Body. With Amanda Seyfried and Megan Fox. I think those are really, I love when they manifest themselves in these like violent and sort of scary ways, because that's sometimes how it feels to be in a relationship or be in a friendship with someone. It's like, it feels violent, it feels scary, it feels terrifying. But I might have to check out Motherland. Thank you. Wait, do you like Motherland? Or okay, all right. All right.
Okay, over here.
So I was wondering what your take on sex lives of college girls is.
Ooh.
And also, I guess a part two is, how do you think the Bechdel test holds up today? And do you have like your own criteria as you've talked about all these shows?
I was wondering if we were going to get through this conversation
It was
without
on my
saying
list,
Bechdel.
so thank you so much.
So I still haven't finished the first season of Sex Lives of College Girls, but not because I didn't like it, just because I
You watch a lot of
I
television.
do watch a lot of things, and I sometimes have to drop them and then come back to them. But I did watch the first like 6-ish episodes out of however many there have been. I thought it was really like a really smart, and I appreciated that. Like, there's a lot of shows, especially more geared to YA shows today, that like feel like they're ripped from Twitter in like the worst way possible, where it's just like kids or like young adults saying all the like socially or like politically correct things, but in ways that don't feel real and just feel like they're typing it out instead of actually the way people would say them in real life. And I thought Sex Lives of College Girls did a really good job of not leaning into that too much. Like, you had all these different types. Like, you had the girl who thinks who's like hiding the fact that she's gay, and then you had like the black girl who's like hooking up with her coach or like her assistant coach. I don't remember what he was to her exactly, but it was totally inappropriate because he was also married. It is the whole thing. And then there's the one girl who was there and like didn't like, she struggled with the financials, and like I was like, oh man, this feels like a real show. And Mindy Kaling, who was one of the creators of the show, she has a spotty record when it comes to certain things. Like, never have I ever. I had a lot of issues with that show.
Ooh, do share, yeah.
I mean, mainly just like, why is this 50-something-year-old white guy narrating this story? Like, I didn't need that. Whoever that was he a tennis star? Yeah, I thought it was a little weird, and I was like, this is the choice we're making, the creative choice we're making. But I thought Sex Lives of College Girls was a really smart show, and you've reminded me that I need to finish it, the first season. I don't know if it got picked up for a second season, but yeah, I thought it was fun. Like, I thought it was fun.
I'm interested in your thoughts. I recently did a binge of new Disney and Pixar films. So like watched Frozen and Encanto and like Turning Red and cried on all of them. But I was really fascinated to think about how they showed female friendships with like such a more nuanced look, and like especially in something like Encanto, where they talk about so much generational trauma and they show the relationship between the sisters and give so much more context into it. And anyway, it made me like wonder how you think about the relationship in between popular shows that we all watch and the shows that kids are watching, and how that influences each other. Like, the shows that kids are watching right now don't have the prince saving them at the end of the day, which I love, you know, and all of these, it gives a very different view. And for the most, Moana, like for the most part, it's saying you should be an individual and live your life and go for it. And so I just like, yeah, I wonder how you think that influences the kind of shows that are going to be created as kids get attuned to this.
Ooh, that's such an interesting question. I mean, I can't predict the future, but I do think like kids are much better off than I was as a kid. Like, I grew up firmly on Disney. I still love Disney. I visit there as often as my wallet allows me, and I've seen all the Pixar movies, including Turning Red. And what I see, at least in like all of these shows that are current, like something like Russian Doll or Everything Everywhere All at Once, like that are dealing with generational trauma, I see that as like kids who grew up in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, and throughout, like wrestling with like these things that were not talked about in previous Disney or whatever. So I can imagine that like, there obviously younger generations have a lot to deal with in different ways than we did, and the pandemic is like, we don't even know what the pandemic is going to do to like art for kids who are experiencing it now. It's going to be probably really messy in the same way that like Everything Everywhere All at Once or Russian Doll is very messy, but like in a different way. So I imagine that they'll be well adjusted in ways that we weren't, and that'll manifest itself in the art. Especially when it comes to representing anyone, like lots of different demographics and sexuality and all those things. But I think they'll also be kind of screwed up in other ways that we weren't, because we weren't 5 years old living in the middle of a fucking pandemic. Like, it's like there's gonna be a whole lot of other stuff going on. But I love the relationship between the friends in Turning Red. Like, it was so just they had their lingo, they had their BTS like boy band that they were obsessed with. Like it just felt really real, and I love the fact that was yes, it was partially about the relationship between her and her mother, but it was also about her friendship with her friends and trying to maintain that amidst all of it. And I think it was a really just like realistic and really touching way to depict that.
Okay. One last question. Who's
Hello. I'm a big fan of your work, by the way.
Thank
Super
you.
fan sitting back here. I recently rewatched Sex and the City because Just Like That was so horrifying. And I found myself...
Gotta cleanse the palate.
Yeah. And I was really excited to do that. And I found myself rewatching, I think like seasons maybe 1 through 3, and being completely horrified at Carrie. And
Carrie's the worst. We all know this.
the worst. But like additionally, being horrified by like how deep and detailed of an antihero she like is/was, and like the fact that her friends maybe try to like pull her away from an incredibly toxic human that is the person that she then marries, but like ultimately the showrunners and like lead writers let it persist. And like when I was like watching it, I was like, I genuinely was like, wow, you know, like when I was younger, I didn't see this. And now that I'm Carrie's age in the show and I'm watching it, I'm going, how on earth are her friends allowing her to, you know, and like that. And so then I get to like the anti-hero in general, right? And like, sorry, I have a bit of a cough, but like, why aren't there more female characters that actually just like have their shit together and are focused? And I know that sounds like a bit ridiculous, right? Because it maybe is like a bit boring and people wouldn't tune in, but like in some ways, it's like, isn't that what we want to be showing like young women or just women in general? I don't know, it's like a bit of a spiral, but I guess I just wonder like, from your perspective, like, why do we go so far into like the anti-hero for like female characters, or did maybe no longer, maybe we're evolving out of that, but like, I don't know, like that's just, yeah, it's just shocking.
That's interesting because Carrie's she's so terrible, but like she's so interesting too because she isn't perfect and she makes all these really ridiculous decisions, but I know women who are like Carrie, so like it's kind of realistic. Like you're with that asshole who like doesn't treat you right. At the same time though, at the end of the day, I feel like Carrie and Big deserve each other. Like whatever, they're kind of both insufferable. So I thought that was actually like a better match than her and like Aiden. Yeah, not that Aiden was perfect, but you know, I don't know. That was what was supposed to happen. I do think, in terms of like the anti-hero, I'm gonna bring up Insecure again, but like I think part of what I liked about the Issa character is that she starts off very, very messy, and unlike Carrie, she does come to like get her shit together, and we see like that is the journey. That's what we're like rooting for and what we're hoping for. Yeah. And then Molly was like straggling behind for a while. She was like, I'm just gonna keep being who I am, and I'm just gonna keep judging all these men for not being up to my standards and complain about it because, you know,
I have
Molly.
to admit, I'm still mad at her over Asian Bae.
I was very sad.
Was lovely.
I loved
liked
him.
him.
I loved him
really
too.
liked him, y'all.
But when he ended things, I was like, good for you. I
Yes.
was like,
Yeah.
yes.
I was like, clean break.
Yeah, in the
Very
same
clear.
way that when Nathan ended things with Issa,
Right.
I was like, yes, these are people doing like you're
Adult
not adult
things.
making adult decisions in the right way. So I appreciate that Issa was able to evolve, and I think we're seeing like even with Russian Doll, like that is another big part of it is like she has to find herself, and that is the journey. I think like there are other ways, hopefully there'll be other ways we figure those things out, and not everyone needs to be like this anti-hero necessarily. And I'm trying to think if there's any examples of women right now that aren't like super anti-hero, but like, I don't know. When I think anti-hero, I think of like Don Draper.
That's what because Tony. Yeah.
Yeah, like I mean,
There was like a whole period. But I
Tony
think
Soprano.
there was like a whole period of television though that was dominated by anti-heroes.
Right, but
you
like they
know?
were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Breaking Bad.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I can't think of any. I'm sure as soon as this conversation is over, I will know who the female version of like a Tony Soprano is. But like, yeah,
Queen of the South.
Queen of the South. I haven't watched that show.
It's like a Narcos, but
Oh,
she's like
okay.
a drug. like,
All right.
She's pretty hardcore. I
Yeah.
watch a lot of TV, like
Yeah.
random stuff. So.
Yeah, no, I haven't watched
But
Queen of the
yeah,
South,
that-
but yeah.
We have a challenge, everyone. If you can think of the
Yeah, of course, Olivia Pope scandal and Viola.
Oh,
How to Get Away
Annalise
with Murder.
Keating.
Annalise Keating. Yes. Also like. Yes, weeds. Also, Kim Wexler on Better Call Saul now has like basically turned into Saul and wants to scam everyone, and I love it. Like it's I love it, but it's also sad because I'm like, don't let Saul bring you down. But it's within her. Like he's not even bringing her down. Like it was already there. He's just like he's watered that seed, and it's now turned into an evil flower.
Well, Aisha, thank you so much. Everyone, a round of applause.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
This has been such a fun evening, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed the conversation certainly as much as I did. I'm always surprised when we don't have like 50 million questions, but I'm going to interpret that as I asked all the questions you wanted to ask. So again, on behalf of Manny's, thank you all so much for coming out tonight. We aren't able to do this without an outstanding, small but mighty team, so I would be remiss if I didn't give my crew a shout. First off, by the door, we have Sam, who is part of our cafe team. She's one of the new members of Team Manny's. We also have Darian, who handles our marketing and socials. Here in the middle, we have Angelina, the mistress of all things events. Next to her, we have Lisa, who is our cafe manager. And I want to give a special shout. We have a brand new member. She's only been in San Francisco less than a month. Maya moved from Florida. She fled to come to San Francisco. And so this is... Oh, I'm very clear. I'm from Atlanta. We get to make these jokes all the time. But basically, we are the people who make Manny's happen. And our cafe is actually, each beverage you all have, and I hope everyone has a glass or bottle of some sort, was poured by someone on the Farming Hope team. They are a nonprofit partner. They work with formerly incarcerated, unhoused people, giving them culinary and hospitality skills, training, and then they apprentice here at Manny's, and then they work with them to place them in amazing, especially with everything going on with the economy right now, jobs and opportunities in some of the top restaurants and kitchens around the Bay. So we're so excited, so proud of that partnership. I know now for many of you this is your first time, but it won't be your last. If you come for another event, just come early and get yourself some dinner. The food is amazing. So before I let you go, we always want to make sure, because we know everything is social, please feel free, tag us, talk about us. We are welcome to Manny's on all platforms. Right, Darian? Yeah. Okay, Darian gives a lovely smile where he's like, you better push the socials. Yes, and now he's telling me the next thing. So as I mentioned earlier, most of our programming is around politics and civic engagement, but we do have a really great mix. So I do want to tell you about a few things coming up that I'm really excited about. So tomorrow we have Total SF. Are any of you familiar with SF Chronicles podcasts or not? Okay. So Total SF is Heather Knight and Peter, whose last name I'm blanking on. Yes. And what they do is they basically tell stories of San Francisco. Like in one of my favorite episodes, they interviewed Bishop Megan Rohr, who's actually a friend of Manny. They are the first openly transgender bishop of a major Christian denomination. They interviewed them on the Ferris wheel down at Golden Gate Park. The sound quality, but it was such a good conversation. So they're going to be recording live here tomorrow, celebrating Emperor Norton, which if you've lived in the area long enough, you at least maybe have heard something. See, yes, we want that energy. So please join us for that tomorrow. And then following that, if you took Muni to get here, or you tried to get an electric bike, or you're wondering, why would someone go bust out the windows of a bus depot? Because that made sense. We're going to have the director of SFMTA here for an old school town hall. So bring your complaints gently and respectfully and your questions for that. That is a free event tomorrow evening. And then next week, we have 2 events that are really cool. The U.S. Surgeon General is going to be with us on Monday. They've promised me he's going to wear the uniform. I'm so excited. Something about uniforms. So he will be here in conversation with Manny, talking about connection, dealing with COVID, other things. What's it like to wear a uniform every day? The things that really matter. So that's going to be Monday night. And then on next Tuesday, I'm really excited because clearly we are all NPR fans here, and hopefully that also means you're a WNYC fan. Anna Sale from Death, Sex, and Money is launching and celebrating the release of the paperback version of her book, We Can Do Hard Things, or Talk About Hard Things. I'm really more excited about the podcast, I gotta admit. But what she's doing that's really kind of iconic in a way, she is going to have a book celebration / karaoke showcase showdown. She wants singers. Would you like to come? She would love to have you.
I haven't done karaoke in over 2 years.
We have beer. That you have to.
Okay,
Come on.
maybe.
Yes.
I gotta pick my
All right,
song.
we'll save a seat right there just for you. Whatever wine you need, because we all know that karaoke while sober is boring. So come on out for that. We will have copies of her book available for sale. She will be signing. That is going to be next Tuesday. We're really excited. There's a lot going on here, and you all help make this possible, as well as people like Josh back there who loves Motherland and loves Manny so much. He is one of our sponsors. Sponsors make monthly contributions to keep the lights on. They helped us survive the pandemic and help us have enough of a cushion so that we can just focus on having great programming and bringing it to community. And so if you're interested in learning more about that, I'm happy to speak with you afterward, or Darian or Angelina can speak to you on that as well. With that very extended remix of a closing, thank you all so much. Have a great evening and go out and have fun in the city.
Recording